We're live.
Good evening. This is the Council Rock Finance Committee meeting. It's a public meeting. We'll go around the room and introduce everyone, and then we'll get started. My name is Mike Thorward. I'm the school director.
Bob Reiner, Director of Business Administration.
Ed Tate, school director.
Robert Fraser, superintendent.
Kathleen Mulholland, School Director.
Kevin Carpet, Cornerstone Advisors.
Nancy Carroll, Citizen.
Matt Frederickson, IT director. Mark Bialik, school director.
Denise Brooks, School Director.
Okay, I'll take it away.
Yes, I just want to first thank everyone for coming tonight. And we'll get started with Kevin Carpet to go over our quarterly investment update. But I also want to say with the limited number of board members here, there are three items that are really or deep in discussion items that I was looking for direction for. And I am recommending that I just bypass them for tonight because there's four members that have really strong opinions that I would like to have as we debate this, as opposed to having to re-debate it and re-debate. Those are, the first one is an update on the Cruces Stadium uses fees and North Stadium turf. This has nothing to do with the item that was brought up last board meeting. This is really to do with the $300,000 from the original turf coming in, and Cruces rental payments have now paid off this $300,000 that was determined that they need to pay off. So we wanted to talk about moving forward from there. But I don't want to do that tonight. The next discussion is, we've done this I think 3 times, to talk about the high school free reduced lunches and the effect it has on the food service department. And I know Mr. Grubb has a very strong opinion on this, so I really need him here to discuss that item. And the board item is the renewal of the contract with Arthur Gallagher. This is another contract for a consultant. And Mr. Block and I spoke earlier this week as he knew he wasn't going to be here. And I went over the agenda items, and like many of you, he wants to have Mrs. Thomas's point of view on this. And I'd rather have all of them in the room to discuss our renewal of their contract or how you want to move forward. So those are items that need debate and discussion. I'd rather have that with 9 board members or at least 8 board members or so.
So just to touch on that briefly, if I can,
Yes.
I am going to ask that we have RFPs done for this renewal of this contract. It's been a long time that we've been with Gallagher. I know it's been about 5 years.
Yeah. We did an RFP in 2013. At that time,
Okay.
They reduced their cost to keep the business from $148,000 to $102,000. We haven't had a raise since then. I don't need to go into any more.
Right.
Right now, I have compelling arguments on why I would say, I would argue, I'm not going to argue with you, but I will have a different side of that opinion.
Okay.
Okay.
Is any board members here disagree with what Bob proposed?
As far as removing from
On the agenda tonight?
Oh, yeah.
They're not going to go on the agenda until we talk about this.
Right.
I don't necessarily agree with not having a free and reduced school lunch conversation because of one board member.
It is
Really?
4 board members, but I know 4 board members.
Board members aren't here,
Right.
but you have one who has one strong opinion who we kind of know what that opinion is. Conversation. But that's just my thought. If that's not something that's pressing,
It is not.
you can put it off to the next meeting. I'm fine with it.
And you're proposing bringing these 3 up to the next monthly finance?
Yes.
And that's okay?
Yes, I brought, if you remember, the free and reduced lunch, I brought that up before, and we were getting into the discussion, but we weren't going to get anywhere, and I said I'd bring it up again. And I need to continue to bring this up because it's an issue that down the line is going to cause an issue if we don't make a decision on it. I understand the ramifications of it.
All right, can you just very broadly just outline what is the controversy over this, just so I know, so I can start reading?
Yes, all our schools except the high schools are in the National School Lunch Program. The National School Lunch Program provides for free and reduced lunches. If we are in the program, we would be reimbursed, I think, $3.32 from the state and federal government for all free lunches that we give out,
Right?
and $2.92 for reduced lunches.
Okay.
Because we're not in the National School Lunch Program in the high school, we're not in that high school because of the limitations on what can be provided, everything from portion size and everything else that we know high school students wouldn't purchase as much. Whereas National School Lunch Program, we've been out for years, but we still allow for free and reduced lunches. What's happening now, though, is we're not getting the revenue in for them, but it's costing us money. In the past, when the food service department was running more out of profit, I wouldn't even say profit, more of a break even, it didn't matter as much. We are starting to drop into the negatives, and now this is a lost revenue, and I want to have a debate with the board on how that should be funded.
Okay, but that comes along with a lot of bureaucracy, right? If you want
Yes.
to, yeah. Okay,
Not
got it.
necessarily, no. If we go with the,
I didn't
back to the
understand.
federal program, then there's a lot of restrictions. We're talking about restrictions that we put on the program, and whether, really the question is, how are we gonna fund the
Yes.
kids that can't afford to buy lunch?
And at what level?
And at what level, sure, but, and what restrictions, if any, we're gonna put on high school kids who can't afford to.
We'll talk on the phone about
Sure.
this, you explain.
I have an opinion, and like I.
We're gonna have the discussion.
You-
I just wanted a broad outline. I'm not trying to cause trouble.
You're not causing trouble.
You're not at all.
Question.
I need to make it financially sound, and if we don't come to a decision with this and make a decision, the finances are gonna change here, and everyone's gonna look back at me and say, how'd this happen? And so we need to make the decision. And Mr. Grubb has a strong opinion, and he sometimes dominates the conversation. Do you agree?
No, I don't.
I disagree with you sometimes.
But I just wonder, listen, and I don't want to prolong this meeting, but I just wonder why it's necessary, with all due respect to Jerry, why it's necessary to delay this conversation because of one person's maybe outlying opinion. We're a board of 9, right? So I get it that there's only 5 of us here, and maybe 5, including Kathleen, I guess, right? So maybe Kathleen doesn't have all the information, but, and again, I'm not really objecting to the idea of moving the discussion. I'm objecting more to the idea, the reason for moving the discussion.
It is because 4 board members aren't here,
Okay.
but we all recognized it. There's a strong opinion by one of them.
Mark, I'll take it a little.
I think we can just put a period that after 4 board members are here, and I'd feel much better.
I think the avoidance here is we're gonna have this conversation again, whether we have this conversation.
Mike, there's no doubt in my mind, we're gonna have this conversation again anyway.
But there's-
Even if we fully vetted it tonight, we would have this conversation.
Sure.
But there's 4 board members absent and 1 board member who's not
Got
prepared
it.
to
I
fully
agree.
participate, so.
And that's.
I'll read up and learn and be ready.
Give me a call and I can give you the whole history and everything if you'd like. And I'll show you
Thank you.
numbers, I can do whatever you want so that you'll feel more caught up on this.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so nobody has objections across these 3. I just want to make sure. Okay. All right.
Okay. And Kevin is here, and Kathleen, you have been Kevin Carla before, but he is the gentleman I spoke to you about before that is a Council Rock grad and has done very well for himself as an expert, I would say, in what he's going to talk about here.
Absolutely. And thank you all for having us, or having me here tonight. I can tell you that the information we're going to share with you today is a lot more settled than the weather outside, because that is something crazy. And just to give everybody the real quick overview before we dive into the presentation, we're still not talking about a lot of interest on the cash, right? It's a heck of a lot more than it was a year ago. It's infinitely more than it was 2 years ago. But right now, just to give you an idea, that current rates are right about that 1% and kind of what's modeled in the budget. We're going to talk a little bit at first about where we see interest rates going in the short term, and then give a review of how the money is actually being managed now. So if you flip to the second page, what you'll see here are 3 different lines. The green line, and these are all different treasury yield curves at different time periods. So the green line is a recent 2 weeks ago curve. The tan line is the beginning of the year, and the blue line at the bottom is the beginning of last year. And what you'll notice is the green line, is the green line at the short end, where maturities are a lot closer, has moved up fairly significantly. And again, we're still talking about 1%. This isn't the good old days where you got 3, 4, 5%. But it has moved up significantly. But if you look further out on that green line, you'll see it's dipped below the tan line, and it's basically back to where the blue line was of 2 years ago.
Kevin,
Sure.
this is something we're going to want to correct for the public, because this slide is going to be presented and for the public. So do you see how the lines don't actually correspond to the dates on that,
It
on the
does on our
screen?
printed
Yeah.
It does in our printed one, but not on the PowerPoint that you're showing. So, and it doesn't on Matt's screen. So I don't want to interrupt, we don't have to stop, but that's just something we're going to want to fix.
Yep.
Right.
You know what, Kevin, I will apologize. I turned this into a PDF. I mean, from your PDF back into a PowerPoint so I could get it on here. So that's why this happened.
Okay, in the
That's my
future,
fault and I didn't notice it.
and we'll send the PowerPoint in the future. We'll just send the PowerPoint so you don't have to undo it. But thank you, I didn't even notice.
I didn't see it either, and that's why it happened.
Thank you.
I'm looking at my chart here.
Yeah, so, but the green line has moved up at the short end, mainly because the Federal Reserve has raised rates several times over the past year, and they have control over that short end, the 1 month to say 1 year, 2 year, by setting policy. But further out, they also had control over or had an impact on interest rates by owning $4.5 trillion worth of bonds. And we'll talk about that. And if we flip to the next page, this is a fairly confusing chart, but ignore all of the yellow dots. They're just individual federal FOMC member votes of where they think rates are going to be. Focus on that green line where you see it going up over time. That's the median expectation of where interest rates will be in the future by the different members of the Fed. So you see for the end of 2017, they're right about where they are now. The median's right about 1.3, 1.4. In 2018, they have it up to about 2%, and by the end of 2019, they're up more in a 3% type range. But then you look at those other lines underneath, the white and the blue lines, they're where the market is predicting rates are going to be. So you have the Fed at the top saying that rates are going to move up more quickly than the market is. And the reason that's important is we are solely invested in assets that are affected by the Fed move. So we mentioned that the Fed owns a bunch of bonds out longer. We don't own any of them. It will, through a lot of different moving parts, affect what happens at the short end, but we're really focused on that green line and how the green line and the white and blue lines interact, because that will be the current income for the district going forward. We don't see the Fed raising rates for the balance of this year, mainly because they are looking out further and they want to get that $4+ trillion off their balance sheet. The Federal Reserve historically has not done anything with long-term rates. It's allowed the market to decide on that. But since the Great Recession, they have bought a lot of bonds trying to prop up asset values. Well, at this point, they're feeling pretty good. Unemployment's low. Inflation is but they don't want to be too late to the game to slow down inflation. So for the balance of the year and going forward, we think they're going to sell those bonds that they own and leave short-term interest rates where they are. So right in that 1%, 1.25% type of range.
Kevin, that chart, I mean, last quarter, it's become pretty standard in that the market's showing a markedly different opinion.
So yeah, so over time for the past go back a decade, the market and the Fed were always, the dot plot didn't exist, but they were always lockstep. You knew what the Fed was going to do. But since the Great Recession, the market has continuously been lower than what the Fed says it's going to be, and the Fed has continuously come back to the market. So
I just, for the public's sake, who maybe I go back together.
Right.
It's not new.
Yeah, this is not new. This is not at all new, and it's
Kevin, with the Fed selling the bonds, that's going to have a effect of reducing the longer term rates.
Well, so if they go out and sell the bonds, but there isn't a market to buy them,
Yes.
the long-term rates will actually start going up. But they're, yeah, but the,
Same thing last year.
yeah, but the,
Last time we talked about
yep,
this.
but now there is, you know, the Fed isn't going to, the Fed has worked long and hard to manage interest rates. It would be hard to believe that they're going to come in and foolishly dump this, because we also have, you know, what they own are mortgages and treasuries. Well, treasury rates jump. The federal government's got to fund that. If mortgage rates jump, the real estate market gets hurt. So they're going to be very cautious about it. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're not already talking to banks and other potential buyers to say, hey, if we start selling, is there going to be demand for it? Because they don't want interest rates to jump too quickly here. Yeah, so here is a snapshot, and it's a little bit difficult to read on the screen, but of just the Wilmington Trust money. So you can see we had given them $20 million back in February, and that is up to $20,056,000 and change as of the end of the quarter. And as of the close of yesterday, that was $20,083,000 and change. So we have been making money in that area of the market. And you can see the breakdown on the left side, it's by coupon. And so that's how much income is getting paid quarterly or semi-annually on the holdings. And, you know, again, these aren't exciting numbers. We're getting a coupon of 1.76 on about $1 million. And then on the right side, you can see the maturity breakdown of when if we were to not sell anything, if we were to just tuck these bonds in our back pocket, when would the district get all the money back? And I can see the 2019 is on the screen here is tough to read.
I just took care of it.
Yeah, but you'll see that, you know, of the 20 million, about 12 million of it is going to mature either this year or next year, and then about 8 million of it is out in 2019 or 2020. And so the portfolio itself has a duration of about 1 year, which means if interest rates were to move 1%, the portfolio move up 1%, the portfolio would lose about 1%. But it's important to remind everybody that is short-term volatility. This is all federally guaranteed paper. So if rates were to move up and this 20 million and change went down to 19 million, 9 something, we could just hold it for a year, 2 year, 3 year, and we would still collect our coupon and we would get our par back. So I know we spoke last time about some volatility in the short term, but I just wanted to mention that.
And you're going to mention this, I'm sure, but just remind everyone, including the public, that the original allocation to Wilmington was based on the idea that if something like that should happen, this 20 million is not something that Bob needs to draw from right away. So and you can take that year and recover that.
Correct. Thank you. Absolutely. And that 20 million was also on the conservative side of really bad stuff would have to be happening with the district's finances to dip into that 20 million. So on page 5, you'll see at the top, in the top box, the Wilmington Trust portfolio and the performance, and this is just for the month of July, was positive 0.16 versus T-bills. So if we had just bought 90-day T-bills, would have returned about 0.09 for the month. And then when you look down underneath, we have the other assets. So you have Pliget at 56 million, TD Bank at 25 million, and FMB Newtown at under $1 million at the end of the month. Of that Pliget, I will mention that 30 plus million of the 56 is in the bond proceeds that are being spent down currently. I know we've talked about that, but the Pliget exposure on the general account is below that 25 million, and that 2016 GO will be spent down over time.
Kevin, do we have return information for Pliget and First National Bank as well?
Yeah, so Pliget, not in this presentation, I can send it to you in a more formal report, but they are all yielding. So Pligett's yield is 0.95 right now. The TD yield is about 0.9, so just a little bit lower. And then FMV, off the top of my head, I don't remember that number, but
Can you include that in quarterlies going forward?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And I just want to point out that with FNP there, that's not a loss. We spent that money.
Yes, yes, yeah,
That's not,
yes.
just for the public, I mean, there was not a loss of that, half the money we spent
Right.
on whatever cash flow we needed.
Mhm.
That's food service and that's student activities.
One of the
A lot of
checkbooks.
stuff are going
Yeah.
down, yeah.
Mhm.
And nothing's coming in.
Right.
And then, so on page 6, and we won't spend much time on here, but here are the actual underlying holdings of the Wilmington portfolio and everything that doesn't say US Treasury bills. You can see FNMA's, Fannie Mae, you have Freddie Mac right above that, you have the Federal Farm Credit Bureau above that. So we do have different issuers underneath with different maturity dates, but by and large, you know, I look at this and say, there's about as little risk in this portfolio as we sit here today as we possibly could get. I'm certainly not the world's most interesting man when it comes to what we own in this portfolio.
So just, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask again.
Yep.
So next quarter, can you include the holdings in Pliget and break it down like include the sheets here?
So yeah, it won't fit on one page like that
I don't
because
expect
it
it
has multiple.
Right.
Yeah, but
But so my expectations, just speaking for myself, my expectations would be that we should have a report on all the holdings in the portfolio, not just the new one,
Mhm.
right? So understanding that TD Bank is, well, it's a deposit account, it's kind of backed by, or it's collateralized a little differently than we thought, right?
Mhm, yeah.
But, so you really probably can't break that down. I guess you can,
Well,
right?
I can provide the Act 72 collateral.
Okay. And then, so I guess the same thing for First National Bank. So for me, I mean, because my goal is to see that this is safe, right? The custodian is properly insured and safe.
Mhm.
We're not, the fees we're paying is reasonable, and the yield we're getting is fair. Not just with Wilmington Trust, but everyone.
Mhm.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. And I'll mock something up and send it to Bob to circulate.
Great.
That's
That'd be
okay.
great. And then just include it in the quarters going forward. That'd be great.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep, yep. Yeah, and again, because Wilmington was the new one, that's why
That's
I was focusing on that. And then finally, so we have the first full quarter, and this is a very simplistic chart when you understand what you're looking at, but I did want to just put it there to start the education process on what we are looking at. So that gray box you see on the screen is the peer group of other money market funds. So at the very top means it's the best performing money market fund. At the very bottom, it's the worst performing money market fund. The black dot is the benchmark 90-day T-bills. So you can see for the quarter, that returned 0.2%. If you look up the green box, letter B, that has the 0.3%, that is the net of fee return for the quarter, and this is just the Wilmington money. What we'll do going forward is actually plot Wilmington, TD, Pliget, and then the aggregate, and FMB Newtown. So we'll actually see at this point 5 different. So we would have each of the underlying providers and then the aggregate right there. But just for this, I wanted to get everybody to conceptually understand that peer group, that gray box has several hundred money markets in it. So it's ranking their performance, right? And then we can plot against it and say, you know, at a 0.3% net rate of return, that puts us in the 9th percentile there. And then underneath, we just show the median money market returned about 0.13 for the quarter. And I'll tell you, with where rates are right now, the biggest driving factor there is fees, right? So money markets can charge, you know, it sounds absurd to most people when you say you're making 0.5% and you're getting charged 0.5%. But that's what a lot of them do. To remind everybody or to inform those who may not know, Wilmington Trust is providing the management and the custody for 2 basis points, so 0.02% per year, 0.08. I'm sorry, 8, it's 2 basis points per quarter. 8 basis points per year, so 0.08%. We have seen that, and we've talked about this before, that the Pliget, over time, Pliget had deferred a lot of fees because they couldn't post a negative return. We were just looking at that recently internally, and we need to make some calls to make sure we understand it, but it looks like those deferred fees, if they don't recapture a big chunk of them by the end of this year, that they'll actually be unreclaimable. So they have started moving their fees out there. If you're in the institutional class, they're charging 0.26% per year, but that may become more certain than what we had before when we first started talking, and we said there's like $8 or $10 million of deferred fees in here. Well, if there's only, I think 5 million is scheduled to roll off this year to make them unclaimable. So those are the types of discussions for today's meeting. You know, I made an assumption that August 3rd probably wasn't going to be a hugely attended meeting, and you know, and we didn't do a deep dive, but going forward, we will, you know, exercise each of the component parts.
I just want to say again, Mark's going to get credit for this again.
It's a good night for me.
Wow.
We, in the past, never had a quarterly evaluation of our investment portfolio. We did what we did, and we got the results we got. This reporting, and although you may say it looks simple or something like that, this is very valuable to all of us to see where we're going, and if we should be making adjustments. Right now, it looks like it's performing well. But in the past, we did not do this, so I just want to make sure, Kathleen, you know that this is probably something most districts aren't doing.
And most importantly, and you're right, Bob, but most importantly, we have an independent, objective, unbiased consultant who's looking at the people who are managing the money and reporting to us. In the past, when we did have someone come in, they were the people that were directly charging us the fees. They were the people that were directly buying the securities for the portfolio. And when I first looked at it and put it on a spreadsheet, we were paying about $100,000 in fees and getting about $28,000 in interest. And that was a concern, right? So you heard me ask Kevin the question, is our money safe, first of all, or do we have the custodial contracts that cover that? He's nodding his head yes. Are our fees reasonable, and is our yield fair? That's all we want, right? And it also helps buffer Bob and us as board members, because if all that went bad before, we're all going to lean over the table and say, Bob, what'd you do? We're counting on this. Now Kevin's going to take the bullet for it, right? Because
now everybody's going to lean and look at me.
Right.
No,
but that's what he does, and that's good.
and absolutely, and you know, right now, again, the yield is fair, but the yield stinks.
Right.
But that's a market. That's because the market stinks. But as rates start over the next year or two, start getting up to the 2.5, if they get up to 3%, I think you are going to see some spread between what TD's willing to pay, what Pliget's paying, what Wilmington can get. And we can be a little bit more active. You know, again, we're relatively early in the Wilmington relationship, but I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't have a discussion about, as the tax money came in, not just defaulting to putting it over at Pliget, but asking them to do something maybe a little bit separately, a little bit shorter. And those are discussions that Bob and I are going to have over the coming months.
You mentioned TD. Can you just remind some of the board members who were here, and maybe some of the newer ones, certainly Kathleen, what happened with that relationship when you first came on board?
Okay, so I didn't make any friends. I remember that. So the TD relationship is the depository relationship, and there's a rule called, except the collateral needs to be Act 72. So any deposits that are over the FDIC limit, right, so that would be at risk, need to be backed by the bank. So Act 72 gives way too wide a range of allowable. It isn't like they buy treasury bonds. They own all asset-backed securities as our collateral. Well, we came in and the spread between what they were paying the district and what they were making on the bonds was, I think, 1.25%, maybe a little bit
Greater than
more.
that,
I'm on the record now, so I just want to make sure I want to be low rather than high. But so we went back and renegotiated. So we had two avenues they could go down. Either make the collateral better, right? Not that it's in trouble now, but it could be in trouble, or pay us more, and they have. And they've continued to move up the yield with the Fed raising rates. So, it's now a known commodity that when the Fed raises, we expect there to be a commensurate change or increase in hours. Whereas I think before it was just easier if you don't push service providers, because I'm sure they'll try to keep more of it, right? It's not in their best interest to always push all those savings or all that increased income out to you. So, but we are, we still look at that collateral, and that would be the disaster scenario where we had to get into it. We still don't love it, but we have mitigated it in different ways.
Great.
Any other board comment? In the interest of letting you leave, any public comment just on this piece?
I just didn't understand that somebody deferred payment, that we owe somebody money.
No, I'm sorry. So inside of Pliget, right, with
Or fees.
it would come out of future earnings. It wouldn't be a line item. But
And if they don't collect it by a certain date, they can't collect it? Is that what you said?
Yep. So their contract says they can defer fees, and what happened was when interest rates got really low,
Right.
they got below what their actual fee level was.
Right.
Right. So in this business, you can't
Right.
take money. You can't earn a negative all the time. So what they did was they lowered their fees to pay out a little bit. Right. But that gap that they didn't charge, they deferred. They said, we may want to be able to collect it in the future, but their contract says they only have 3 years or 5 years to collect it before it goes away.
Can
So,
I get this contract?
well, the document is publicly available if you want to use it as a negotiating tactic for any of your contracts. But yeah, so it was fees that they were owed, right or wrong, whether you think they were too high or not, but that they were owed, that they pushed.
So what's the date where they come over play?
So the end of 2017 is the bulk of it, then a little bit on 2018 and 2019.
And what kind of money are we talking about?
Well, across all of Pliget, we're talking.
We have significant, we only have a very small portion of the Pliget portfolio. They have billions of dollars. So when he gives you a number, it isn't anything close to when you look at our number. So he may say $8 million or $20 million, but that's a very small part of the $8 billion they're managing. You see what I'm saying?
We're not going to lose anyone.
They're not managing $8 billion for Council Rock.
No, that's what I'm saying. We have a small portion of what they manage.
Well, wait a
We'll tell
minute, they had $70 to $80 million of our money when we started this. And that's not a small amount of money.
Well, at the same time, if they're taking these expenses out of fees out, they're netting it out of earnings. That means their earnings are going to drop like a lead balloon. And guess what? We're going to move somewhere else in. So they can't do this and not be him looking at it and say, you know what, their yield is dropping so much, we need to get it out of there. and move it
I
somewhere else.
understand the reasoning now, it was explained.
I just want to make sure you don't think
I
that,
don't understand the amount,
oh, yeah.
like what might they write off at the end of the year?
Oh, so on their entire lot, right? And so not just in Council Rock's money, but commingled money from all around the state. It would be, I believe the number's 5 million at the end of this year. And then after 17 and 18, it's maybe 3 million combined.
Thank you.
I really like this graphic, and, so, are we B in this graphic?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
No, you
So
said that, I'm just,
Oh.
so we're at the top of the heap for the last quarter.
we are,
Comparable.
Yep.
That's great.
top of a tiny molehill.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
but-
sure, it's a little
Yeah.
slice of the market of very conservative investments.
Mhm.
Right.
Good job, Kevin. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks very much.
What year did you graduate?
1997.
We'll save you the next two items. But, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming out.
You look much younger than you are.
Could you go to slide 13?
You're not numbered, so.
Well, look on your screen, can't you see it on your screen? It is the banking depositories, it's just a motion that. There it is. This is really just saying, these are our depositories that on an annual basis we need to approve. So I'm putting the consent agenda and you're gonna say, yes, those are our depositories. So it's a very quick agenda item. It's just that I should.
Is that what we're gonna say?
Well, okay.
Yes.
I'm just kidding,
I
Bob.
know.
I'm just kidding.
High school senior trip agreements, this is the senior trip, August 10th to 14th. In board docs, there's a copy of the agreement if you want to look at it. I do have a couple copies here if anyone wants to look at it, but
Why is
it's,
it that they don't do identical trips?
they don't do what?
The trips are not identical, like there's one more lunch for south and there's north and the costs are, I mean, they're close, but they're close on the quads but like the single occupancy is considerably higher. I can't remember which one. Why?
Because they all feel that the way they're doing it is comfortable with them. I know the one might have a car or something like that for emergencies or here, the whole thing is different just based on what the administration feels comfortable with. If you'd ask us to try to put something together that we ask them to do it, so they'd both be the same, we could ask the
No,
administration.
I'm not asking that, it's just, it sort of makes me wonder, would there be any money saved if it was consistent, would the price be lower if this wasn't done as two? I'm just.
Yeah, I would have to ask, I haven't negotiated the contract, so I don't know the ins and outs of them. The high school administration really sits down with the gentleman each year and does that. If you'd like me to get involved, I will.
It's more like a curiosity. It's just a curiosity, but I mean, it's just, these trips are expensive.
The students can afford those.
Yeah.
They do.
But I mean,
We do pay for nurses or things such as that have to go with special needs children and things like that. So there is some cost to us, but it isn't significant.
We can certainly look into that.
I mean, I don't want any major work, but this comes up every year, and it's just a curiosity that you're looking at these two documents, it's the same trip, same time, same windows.
Right.
And, why does South get 2 lunches and North only gets 1? And why are there's just inconsistency in the cost. It's just.
Mr. Griesbaum and Mr. Raddick are the ones that send them to me, so I'm gonna just sit down with them and say, okay, explain this to me. And if it's just me telling you what it is and why it makes sense to do it that way, that's what I'll do, or I'll get more involved.
Yeah, it just made me wonder if it was, rather than, whatever, 400 kids going from each school, if it was looked at as a trip of 800, is there any efficiencies that could just drive it down?
They go the same time of the year, so it's not like they go in separate weeks or anything. That's the easy ones I had tonight. We would have been here for 3 hours if we had gone through the other things.
So Rick was in the pre-8 now.
Is that it?
Yeah. Any board comment?
Great job.
Any public comment on these
Now,
items?
just as you put time on the public on how long they could speak, maybe it would behoove you to put time on a topic when you have these meetings. Just a thought, like, if next time we're gonna discuss free and reduced lunch, we'll spend 45 minutes, a half hour, an hour and a half. You know what I mean, like try, I think if you push people to a time period, it's more advantageous that they get their important stuff out and you move your meetings along. That's just my.
I understand what you're saying. I do look at debate being important
I do too.
and getting a consensus. And that's why that discussion, there's a lot of different evaluating. points.
And we've already had it twice.
We have had.
Once here and once at a board meeting.
That's true.
That might be 4 times, because I think that is finance at least twice.
That's,
Thank you, Mr. Wagner.
it makes my head. Adjourn?
All right, meeting adjourned.